Welcome back. Before we begin tonight's story, take a second to like the video and subscribe if you enjoy realistic horror stories that feel like they could happen to anyone. Stories told quietly, slowly, the kind that stay with you long after the video ends. Tonight's story comes from the wilderness. And if you've ever been camping far away from civilization, there's a certain moment in the woods when the silence stops feeling peaceful and starts feeling wrong. This happened in Yellowstone National Park. There were 4 of us that summer. Mark was the one who planned the trip. He was the outdoors guy, the kind who owned expensive hiking boots and could name trees like they were old friends. I'd known him since college. Then there was Jason, loud and sarcastic but loyal. And finally Ethan, the quiet one. Ethan always came on our trips, but rarely spoke unless someone asked him something directly. We arrived at Yellowstone late in the afternoon. The sky was wide and pale blue, the mountains in the distance looking almost painted against the horizon. It was beautiful in that overwhelming way that only places far from cities can be. We picked a campsite deep in a forest area about 2 miles from the nearest road. Pine trees surrounded us in every direction, tall and packed close together. When the wind moved through them, the sound was like a distant ocean. By sunset, we had the tents up and a small fire going. Jason cracked open a beer and said, "Man, this is the life." Mark nodded proudly. "Wait till you see the stars tonight." "Zero light pollution out here." Ethan just stared into the woods. At the time, I didn't think much of it. Later that night, the temperature dropped fast. We sat around the fire, the flames popping and throwing sparks into the dark sky. Somewhere far away, a wolf howled. Jason laughed nervously. "Okay, that's a little creepy." Mark waved it off. "They're miles away. Nothing to worry about." But Ethan spoke quietly. "Did you hear that earlier?" "Hear what?" I asked. "The footsteps." We all looked at him. "What footsteps?" Jason said. Ethan shrugged slightly. "I heard something walking around the tents before dinner." Mark smirked. "Probably an elk." Ethan didn't look convinced. The fire burned low around midnight. One by one, we crawled into our tents. I shared a tent with Jason, while Mark and Ethan had their own. The forest became unbelievably quiet once the fire died. No wind, no animals. Just that deep wilderness silence that presses against your ears. I must have fallen asleep quickly, because the next thing I remember was sunlight hitting my face. Morning in Yellowstone was bright and cold. The trees glowed gold in the early light and birds were already chirping. Jason stretched beside me. Man, I slept like a rock. We stepped out of the tent. Mark was already up, boiling water for coffee. But Ethan's tent was still zipped shut. Jason called out, "Yo, Ethan, rise and shine." No answer. Mark walked over and knocked lightly on the tent pole. Still nothing. "Dude's dead asleep," Jason laughed. Mark crouched down and slowly unzipped the tent. Inside, it was empty. At first, none of us said anything. Then Jason frowned. "Bathroom break, maybe?" But something felt wrong immediately. Ethan's backpack was still there. His boots were still there. Even his phone was lying next to his sleeping bag. He hadn't taken anything. Mark's voice dropped. "Guys," he pointed to the ground outside the tent. There were footprints, fresh ones in the dirt, bare feet, and they led away from the campsite, straight into the forest. At first, we thought Ethan might be messing with us. Jason even laughed. Classic Ethan prank, but nobody really believed it, because the footprints weren't normal. They started just outside his tent. Their human footprints pressed clearly into the dirt, each step spaced evenly apart like someone calmly walking away. But Ethan would never walk barefoot through the woods. Not out here. The ground was covered in pine needles, sharp sticks, rocks. Mark followed the trail with his eyes. The prints moved away from camp in a straight line. No hesitation, no turning, just step after step after step, disappearing between the trees. Jason scratched his head. Okay. Maybe he sleepwalked. The idea hung in the air for a moment. Sleepwalking made sense, except for one problem. Ethan had never sleepwalked before, and even if he had, he would have woken up the second his bare feet hit the cold forest floor. Mark grabbed his jacket. Let's go find him. The forest looked completely different once we stepped inside it. From the campsite, the trees had seemed spaced out and peaceful, but deeper in, they packed together tightly. The sunlight struggled to break through the canopy above. The ground was uneven and soft with decades of fallen needles. The footprints were still there, clear, perfect, almost too perfect. Jason muttered behind me, "Dude's gonna owe us breakfast after this." We followed the trail for about 5 minutes. Then 10, then 15. The deeper we went, the quieter the forest became. Bird sounds disappeared. Wayne stopped moving through the branches, just our footsteps and breathing. The prints kept going, but something started to change. I noticed it first. "Mark." He stopped walking. "What?" I pointed down. The footprints were different now. At first it was subtle. The toes looked longer. The heel looked narrower. Jason leaned down to look closer. "That's weird." We kept walking. The prints changed more. The toes spread wider apart. The stride grew longer, too long. Like whoever was making them had started running. Except the prints were still perfectly spaced, calm, controlled. Mark whispered, "Guys, stop." We all froze. Ahead of us, about 30 feet away, the trail of footprints formed a circle. A large one, perfectly round. Like someone had walked around and around in the same path. The dirt inside the circle was disturbed, churned up like something had struggled there. Jason swallowed. "What the hell?" The footprints circled at least 20 times. Then they continued forward, but they weren't human anymore. Not completely. The toes had become long and narrow. The heel had lifted higher off the ground, and the stride. The stride was now nearly 8 feet apart. Mark whispered something under his breath. "What?" I asked. His face had gone pale. "That's not possible." Jason laughed nervously. Maybe a bear stepped in the same prints or something, but we all knew that wasn't true. Because bears don't walk on 2 legs for miles. And bears don't start as human footprints. We stood there for a long moment. Then from somewhere deeper in the forest, we heard something move. The sound was soft, branches shifting, leaves crunching somewhere ahead of us. We all turned toward it at the same time. "Ethan?" Jason called out. No response. The forest stayed completely still again. Mark motioned for us to stay quiet. He stepped forward slowly, following the strange footprints deeper between the trees. Every instinct in my body told me we shouldn't keep going. Something about the forest had changed. The air felt heavier, like we were being watched. Jason whispered, "Maybe he's hurt." That was the only reason any of us kept moving. The footprints continued, but they barely looked human anymore. The toes were long and claw-like now. The heel barely touched the ground, and the stride had grown even longer. 10 feet, maybe more. Mark stopped suddenly. I almost walked into him. "What?" I whispered. He pointed ahead, between 2 trees. Something was hanging there. At first I thought it was a piece of torn fabric, but when we got closer, my stomach dropped. It was Ethan's shirt, stuck on a broken branch about 8 feet above the ground. Jason stared up at it. How the hell did that get up there? Mark reached up and pulled it down carefully. The fabric was ripped down the middle, and it was wet. Not soaked, just damp. Jason touched it, then pulled his hand away quickly. "Dude, what?" "That's not water." Before anyone could say anything else, we heard breathing, loud, deep, from behind us. All 3 of us turned at the same time. The trees behind us swayed slightly. Something large moved between them. I caught a glimpse of pale skin, tall, too tall, maybe 9 feet. Its shape twisted strangely as it moved, like its joints bent wrong. Jason whispered, barely audible, "Ethan?" The thing stopped, completely still. Then its head slowly turned toward us. Even from that distance, I could see its mouth stretching open wider than any human mouth should. A sound came out, not a growl, not a scream, something in between. And then it stood up fully, and that's when we realized it had been walking on all fours, until now. Mark shouted, "Run." We ran without looking back. Branches whipped across my face as we pushed through the dark forest. Behind us, something heavy crashed through the trees. It was fast, way too fast. Jason was breathing hard beside me, gasping, "Don't stop. Don't you dare stop." The thing behind us let out another sound. That same horrible, half scream, half howl. It echoed through the forest, sounding like it was bouncing off every single tree at once. Up ahead, Mark yelled, "The campsite is this way." We ran even harder. My lungs were on fire. My legs felt like they were about to collapse. But the crashing behind us just kept getting closer and closer. For one stupid second, I glanced back. I really wish I had it. The thing chasing us wasn't fully human anymore. Its arms were so long, they could almost touch the ground. Its legs bent backward, like an animal's, and its face still looked a little bit like Ethan, just stretched out. Wrong. So incredibly wrong. The campsite finally appeared through the trees. It felt like a lifetime to get there. Jason sprinted ahead and fumbled for the truck keys on top of the cooler. Mark and I jumped into the cab seconds later, slamming the doors shut. Jason jammed the key in and cranked the engine. The moment the headlights flickered on, the thing stepped out from the trees. Right at the edge of the light, it just stood there, perfectly still. Its breathing was slow, deep. Its pale skin looked almost gray in the truck's headlights. And its eyes, they reflected the light back at us, just like an animal's. But the worst part, the part that will haunt me forever, was when it tilted its head. It was the same exact way Ethan always did when he was confused. They never found him, not a single trace. Except for one thing. About 3 weeks later, a park ranger discovered something unusual about 2 miles from where our campsite had been. It was a new circle of footprints, not human. They were deep, perfectly round. Dozens of steps walking over and over in the same path. And leading away from that strange circle were 3 sets of human footprints. Our footprints, perfectly matching the ones we made the day we ran for our lives. Except these new prints were fresh. Like someone had followed our escape route recently, step for step. And even deeper in the forest, rangers started reporting hearing something moving between the trees at night. Something tall. Something walking on 2 legs. Something that sometimes sounded like it was trying to speak. Thanks for watching. If you want to hear more stories like this, make sure to subscribe.